and I'm the Acting Superintendent of Women's Rights National Historical Park and Harriet Tubman National Historical Park located in New York. On behalf of the National Park Service, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you today to the park's first ever virtual convention days as we commemorate the 172nd anniversary of the first Women's Rights Convention held here in the Wesleyan in Seneca Falls, New York on July 19 and 20 of 1848. This year also marks the centennial of the 19th Amendment that guaranteed women the right to vote in the United States. All over the country for the last several years, institutions, government agencies, organizations, and individuals have planned ceremonies, special events, and programs to herald this occasion. Suffice it to say, 2020 did not turn out as we planned. As I've reflected on that fact over the past several months, it slowly dawned on me that the 5 organizers of the first Women's Rights Convention, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Coffin Mott, Martha Coffin Wright, Marianne McClintock, and Jane Hunt, might have said the same thing about 1848. That year saw Republican revolutions sweep across Europe, the conclusion of the Mexican-American War, continuing cholera outbreaks that killed millions of people across the globe, and an ever-widening gulf between pro-slavery and anti-slavery states. Against this backdrop, an innocuous event served as the catalyst for a new revolution. On July 9 of 1848, Jane Hunt, a Quaker from Waterloo, invited several women to her house for a social gathering. Surrounded by these like-minded women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton unleashed what she described as, quote, the torrent of my long accumulating discontent. She and Lucretia Coffin Mott revisited an idea they had first discussed at the 1840 World Anti-Slavery Convention in London, a convention to address the rights of women. Without the aid of social media, telephone, or many of the other instantaneous means of communication that we enjoy today, these 5 bold women organized a convention and wrote a platform for it titled Declaration of Sentiments, which, like the Declaration of Independence that inspired it, laid out grievances. These grievances, however, identified the many ways in which women were denied equal rights. Being denied the right to vote was only one of the injustices listed in the Declaration. Others included being denied the right to own property, the lack of access to paid work, and the fact that the pursuit of higher education was closed off to women. This convention, organized in 10 days and held over the course of 2 days, drew a respectful crowd estimated at 300 women and men. It became the first of many women's rights conventions. The second one, attended by many of the same individuals, was held in August in Rochester, New York. As the women's rights movement expanded, there was an acknowledgement of the injustices wrought against women of color, particularly Black women. At the first National Women's Rights Convention held in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1850, delegates declared, "The cause we are met to advocate bids us remember the 1.5 million of slave women at the South, the most grossly wronged and foully outraged of all women. And in every effort for an improvement in our civilization, we will bear in our heart of hearts the trampled womanhood of the plantation and omit no effort to raise it to a share in the rights we claim for ourselves." The women's rights movement would grow to encompass a broad variety of goals as the 19th century progressed. Some groups focused on suffrage as the key to other rights, while other women's rights activists focused on organizing women's labor or fighting for the tandem goals of racial and sexual justice. But backlash also followed. Newspaper editorials scorned the ideas presented in Seneca Falls and subsequent conventions. One Albany newspaper declared, "This is all wrong. Society would have to be radically remodeled in order to accommodate itself to so great a change." The women who had the audacity to generate these ideas faced criticism and ridicule. They also faced the sinking realization that such change was unlikely to happen in their lifetimes. Yet the women who started this movement stayed the course and persevered. Stanton put it in perspective this way: "We are sowing winter wheat, which the coming spring will see sprout, and other hands than ours will reap and enjoy." Today, we continue to reap the benefit of the movement our foremothers began, while recognizing where more work was and still is needed. We acknowledge and reflect on the fact that the struggle for women's rights did not result in equal opportunities for all women. And we draw lessons from the past as we push forward. One of the greatest legacies the organizers of the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls have given us is a reminder that the determination and perseverance of a few people has the power to effect great change. I hope you enjoy the 2020 Virtual Convention Days programs. Thank you and stay safe.
Hi, my name is Colleen Jenkins. I am the great-great-granddaughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Here's a photo of her with two of her 7 children. I'd like to show you also her desk behind me. Now it's July. In July, it's hot, it's humid, and it's a great time to foment revolution. As you know, 1776 was the American Revolution, and 1848 was the Revolution for Women's Rights. On her desk here is not only the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, but also the Declaration of Sentiments that came out of Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention, the first Women's Rights Convention. What's great is to build upon a concept of we the people. So, whereas Thomas Jefferson said, all men are created equal, they're endowed with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Stanton and a handful of women built on that and said, all men and women are created equal. They're endowed with inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So that was a kickoff. But I want to tell you something about my mother and grandmother. My grandmother became a civil engineer, and my mother an architect. I'd like to share with you a blueprint. This is a house that my mother designed. And as you can see, it's a design. It's actually a two-dimensional object. It's a design that's for something that must be built. And I would say the Declaration of Sentiments, the Declaration of Independence are designs. They're ideas written on paper, just like this is ideas written on paper. But it's incumbent upon you and me and everybody, all citizens, to make sure that the ideas become a reality. And it takes time. I want you to know that in 1848, my great-great-grandmother was a revolutionary in July. And what she did is she demanded elective franchise. That is the vote. Of course, they demanded many other things like education and access to professions and remuneration for the work they did. But Elizabeth insisted on the vote. That is the primary right of citizenship. And they said, wait a minute, you will make us look ridiculous. It was too radical. But the good news is that today, when we celebrate the 100th anniversary of not only the women's right to vote, but the right to vote, the universal right to vote in America, guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. When we celebrate that incredible 100th anniversary, on August 26, 2020. That is an amazing accomplishment, that every citizen has a right to vote. I'd like to read you the 19th Amendment that was passed in 1920. It says, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." It's a very simple sentence, but it's basically saying no matter who you are, whether you're a male or a female or any other gender, whether you're black, white, brown, any race, any religion, as long as you're a citizen, you have the right to vote, and more importantly, it shall not be denied or abridged for any reason in the United States. So I'm really happy that we can celebrate this 100th anniversary, and here is a celebratory hat saying, "Celebrating 100 years, women win the vote, 1920 to 2020. But I'd like to say that this is not just for women. This is about men and women having a U.S. constitutional guaranteed right to the vote. So I want to end by saying I'm extremely happy that the U.S. Constitution is on the verge of being amended again. There's a very, very high bar to change the Constitution. As we saw with the 19th Amendment, or any change, you need a 75% of the states ratifying. And just recently, Virginia, the great state of Virginia, just ratified the Equal Rights Amendment in its state, thereby becoming the 38th state. And this is very, very simple. Nobody today would say citizens should not have the vote. Nobody would say that. Nobody would take away that right. So the equal rights is basically saying, and I'm going to read it for you, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. Equality of rights under the law. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful concept. And just like any other changes that we made with our U.S. Constitution, these are two-dimensional ideas, the two-dimensional paper with ideas. And since I'm the descendant of a revolutionary, I have no problem debating for the rest of my life what is equality and how can we guarantee it in our law of the land, the Constitution of the United States. So thank you so much for celebrating with us in July when it's hot, humid, and people become revolutionaries naturally. And I give you greetings from my home, but I invite you to the Women's Rights National Park in Seneca Falls, open year-round, but please come in July when we need to make more revolution because we want a more perfect union. That is what our nation is.